Hello and welcome to week 24 of the Bible in a Year. We're cruising along at this point and almost we're approaching the halfway point. And we are this week going to be reading exclusively the book of Job. We start on the 10th with Job chapters 1 through 5, and we almost make it to the end by the end of the week. But I'm going to cover the entire book of Job because it just makes more sense altogether. First of all, one little background detail. We have moved from a section in the Old Testament that is referred to as historical books into a section called the readings: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. But just because we've made that transition does not mean that Job is not historical. We do believe that Job was an actual person, that the events described actually happened. But it's not included in the historical books because there are no historical markers. It doesn't say, in the 5th year of the reign of King Uzziah, these things happened. So we're not sure exactly when they occurred, but we do believe that they occurred. And the book of Job um, deals with I think, an important question for every generation, but especially, because we're here today, because of our own experiences, we've probably had the same question, or we've known people who've struggled with this question. And that is, if God is so good, if God is just and almighty, then why do bad things happen to good people? In Jewish culture, the question was very simple. They knew God was just, they knew God was almighty, but they made the assumption that therefore, when you suffered, when you went through struggles, it had to be because of something you had done, because of your own sinfulness. The problem with that comes with when we run into people who, by all human standards and even by biblical standards, are pretty good. Now, no one's perfect, and we'll acknowledge that. Job was not perfect, um, but compared to most people of his day, he was very righteous. And his suffering that he goes through, that's described at the beginning, is immense, very much disproportionate. We look at the world today and we see people that, by biblical standards, are not good people, that seem to thrive and do very well in this world. And we see people that are committed to the Lord, and no, they're not perfect, but nevertheless, they are children of God, and they go through just incredible struggles. And that is a disconnection for us today. And so how do we address it? And in the book of Job, they try to. After Job goes through these struggles, 3 of his friends come to him, and they sort of go through this debate. His friends represent the traditional point of view. They look at the situation and they say, well, we know God is just, we know God is all-powerful, therefore you must have done something really wrong, Job, and you need to repent and turn from it. Job really wrestles with this because he's truly been righteous. He has sought after God and loved the Lord, and doesn't understand why these things have happened. He almost seems to be leaning towards the conclusion that therefore God must just not be just. He doesn't do what is right because this is not right that these things would be happening to him. But if we just looked at the book as that and then God's response at the end, we'd still have that disconnection. But we have to take into account the first couple of chapters and what the setup for this is. The setup is Satan. The word Satan means accuser. Satan comes before God, and he's been traveling back and forth on the earth. And God asks him, have you seen my servant Job? He actually points out Job. This is one of the reasons why we know that the friend's argument really does not hold water, because God acknowledges Job as righteous. Not perfect, but that he is righteous amongst people. And Satan says, well, of course he's that way. It's selfishly motivated. It's actually a meaningless righteousness, because the only reason Job is like that is because you've put this hedge of protection around him. You've cared for him. You've provided for him. If you let me have my way with him, Job will quickly turn away, and it will be shown that his righteousness was nothing but selfishness. He was only faithful to God because of what he got out of it. And so within limits, God allows Satan to do what Satan does. And Satan's goal is to put a wedge between God and man. That's his ultimate goal. And so he strives to do that by bringing up this question. If God is really just and God is really almighty, then why do bad things happen to good people? And he's trying to draw Job away from God, as Job's wife says in, I believe it's chapter 2, to curse God for what he is going through, and to pull away from God because he's not receiving from God what he thinks he should. Um, and so this debate goes on for the vast majority of the book of Job. And in the end, God comes down and he answers Job. And the answer is not in an earthly way very satisfying, because we want a full explanation of what has happened and what is going on. But instead what we get is God reminding Job that I'm God. I'm the God you've always known, meaning that God is just, God is right, God is all powerful, God has created everything. And it's not necessarily for Job to understand why bad things sometimes happen to good people. Sometimes they happen because, now we know from the first 2 chapters, it's because that's what Satan does. Satan doesn't want the world to be in order. He wants it to be in disorder so that we might not want to acknowledge God. But God reminds Job, I'm still God, I'm still with you. Job knows that, but it's a great reminder for him as he then repents of his struggle and acknowledges and gives praise to God. Ultimately, God does restore the things that Job lost to him. But in the midst of even the debate between Job and his friends, in chapter 19:25, we get a beautiful proclamation of faith where Job says, I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end I shall see him. I shall stand on the earth, and I shall see him with my own eyes. I, myself, and not another, how my heart yearns within me. He's acknowledging that I don't get this, but I know in the end, this is what will be, because this is what God has promised, and God is faithful. So even as Job is struggling with that, and that's really the struggle, because Job knows the truth of God's justice and God's power. He just isn't seeing it manifest in his own life at that time, and that's his struggle. And I think it's important for us to go through and recognize that struggle, because we all go through it to small and large degrees at various times throughout our life, to recognize that we're not always going to get an answer that is direct and satisfying the way we would want. But God always comes to us and reminds us, I'm still God. I'm still here. I have not left you, nor will I leave you. And you may not understand in the big picture of things why this is happening, but just know that it doesn't change the fact that I am God, and it doesn't change the fact that I am with you. And that's the book of Job. And it's not always easy to read because we hear that struggle and we perhaps see it in ourselves. But read through to the end. It's actually going to get you into next week before you hear God's response. But I pray that God will bless you in whatever struggles you're going through, or whatever people you know that are going through struggles that need this message, to share with them this week the promises of God and his unending faithfulness. May God bless you as you read his word. Continue to be blessed and strengthened by his grace that is shown there.